Good morning, Dr. Joyya Smith. We're super excited to be meeting with you today. We are hosting the series for Women's History Month, and we realize how fortunate we are here at Suffolk University to have so many female leaders on our campus, which I don't think it's like the norm. And so to have these many female leaders, we want to show our students, our alumni, staff, and faculty the power of having great female leaders. And you, of course, came to mind, and we wanted to see, like, how did you do all of this? How did you get here? And give us some tips. So I'll just start by saying thank you for agreeing to be interviewed. And I'll start by saying, tell us about you and how you got here.
Well, thank you, Ade, for this opportunity to talk about my experience. What's interesting is I often tell the story that I went to college and never left because my career has really spanned, I guess, the last 20 years. And included in that has been a connection to a college or university in some capacity. And so I am a lifelong learner, which, kind of speaks to why I am drawn to higher education. But in terms of who I am as a person, I would say I am a person who likes to share my knowledge. And so I think in a higher education atmosphere, it's primed and ready for that. But what I have learned over time is that I learn a lot from other people, and that's what also brings me joy. So in terms of who I am, I'm a lifelong learner, a sharer, educator, but most importantly, someone who's willing to help and support other people. So that's kind of who I am. And I think the other part of the question is, how did I
get here?
How did I get here? As I mentioned earlier, I went away to college and became connected to a peer mentoring group for minority students. And I went full circle with that program. So I was a participant as a freshman. I became a mentor in my sophomore year, stayed a mentor until I graduated out, and then became the graduate assistant for that same program when I was working on my master's degree. And so what I have learned and determined is that I enjoy supporting students and connecting with the higher education enterprise. And that's kind of how I got my start in higher ed. I thought at some point I would find myself as a counseling psychologist. That didn't pan out, but what did occur was my interest in being involved in multicultural programming for students. So I continued along those lines and then started working with the federal TRIO programs, which afforded me an opportunity to really get a handle on higher education from a variety of lenses. So in my work with TRIO programs, I started out working at Georgia Perimeter College, which is in the Atlanta area. It's now part of Georgia State University, leading some of the Upward Bound and student support services programs. Then I went back to my alma mater and did some more TRIO work there, leading the programs there, and then found myself here at Suffolk leading the TRIO programs here for a short amount of time. But as I mentioned before, I was always interested in multicultural programming, which is really DEI programming. And so based on my involvement here at Suffolk, I was able to land a DEI position here. And so that's how I ended up here. It was really my TRIO experience that brought me to the Boston area, but then my my love for education and programming in the multicultural realm that has brought me to the DEI space, or not really brought me to the DEI space. It's really evolved over time because multicultural programming has really just evolved into DEI programming largely. So that's how I got here. I know that was kind of a long roundabout way, but that's how I made it here, and I'm grateful for this experience.
Well, thank you. That's how I think that in the past, we've always thought about careers as like, a ladder, a step by step, but in reality, it's not a step by step. It's sort of like all the things you learn along the way, create new opportunities and new knowledge comes in, and you take that and do something else with it. And I really appreciate that career path and journey.
Thank you.
Okay, my next question for you is, how has your gender identity affected your career, either in a positive way or in a negative way?
I would have to say my gender identity has really favored me. And in some industries where, let's just say, women are in the minority, a lot of times women may have struggles with advancing or even being heard. But in the education realm, for the most part, my gender identity hasn't really impacted me in a negative way. In fact, I felt more empowered as a woman in this space to share, be creative, to contribute in a way that can be soft but firm. Um, and I just appreciate the fact that, at least in my experience, my gender identity hasn't hindered me, at least as far as I know, as far as I'm aware. Because a lot of times I find myself being supported by other women and men alike. I can point to my supervisors who have been male, who've been nothing but supportive and open. And when I say open, open to my ideas and resourceful and helping me find what I needed to get the job done. So I've been very fortunate when I think about my gender identity and how it's impacted my work. It's favorable for me, but it could be basically because of the industry and education, the space I find myself in. It hasn't been a problem.
So think of the flip side of this. What advice would you give women who are entering a male dominated industry?
Number one, know what you need to know. And I don't know a better way to put it, but do your research, understand perhaps the role, the position, the factors that are involved in the work that you're doing, so that that doesn't become a challenge in the space. I think sometimes women in male dominated areas feel less prepared or capable when perhaps they are not sure. And so I would say that would be the first thing: go in the door, knowing what you know and being confident in what you know. You won't have all the answers, even though, sometimes we like to have them all. But I think being confident in your own abilities, your skills coming through the door will really propel you. The second thing, speak up. I know sometimes it can be a little challenging. Perhaps you might be in a space or a room where, and this happens to women. I've I've heard the research, you say something and then someone else goes behind you and says the exact same thing, and they are lauded for an idea that you may have presented. The one thing that I always say, put things in writing. So if you have an idea and you know that it's maybe not a fully formed idea, but something that can contribute and help, put it in writing, dating it, making sure that you have record of what you said and that it's shared in spaces where perhaps they didn't hear you at the table, but sometimes they'll read it, they'll get it. So those would be the two things. Be confident in your ability, do your research, understand what you need to know, but then speak up and put things in writing. So I guess that's 4 things, huh?
As many as we get.
Yes, yes.
So this combines both issues, how do we then increase gender diversity in the workplace?
First and foremost, you have to know the numbers. You have to do your internal investigation to determine, okay, where are we falling short in gender diversity? And you may have to do a little digging to take a look. And sometimes it's not even that hard. Sometimes you can just look in the room and see who's there and who's not. But that's not always the case. But what you can do to increase gender diversity is to really reach out to other women or men in a particular field and find out, what keeps you engaged in this work, what doesn't, and how can my organization or my institution, how can we retain, support, promote women or men, whatever your difference is there in this role. I think you have to go to the source and find out. You have to ask, but then you also have to know your numbers. So that would be the two things. And then recruit, but not just recruit and then have nothing for people to do once they get there. You have to have a way for them to contribute or they'll just leave.
Can you name one highlight of your career that you deemed successful and how it has shaped your career trajectory?
Ooh, this is a interesting question. I'm really grateful for a lot of the experiences I've had to develop and create programs that didn't exist before. And so I'll just point to something recent. Here at Suffolk, we created a professional development program for faculty and staff. And of course, I have a committee that's helped to organize and put this idea forward. But not only that, this particular program has done exactly what we wanted to do, and that has been to garner momentum and movement around DEI generally. And the program is called Ambassadors for Inclusion. And so I'm very grateful for the team here at Suffolk who's helped to craft this experience, but then on the other side of it, the receivers of the program. I'm really grateful that our faculty and staff and even alumni are part of the program too, have said, yes, I'm interested in learning and I'm willing to be a part of this professional learning experience, to shore up my skills in this area, to do some independent study around DEI or JEDI. And so I'm really grateful for this opportunity because it has really launched, and I'm going to say me personally, launched for me insight on how to develop more professional development programs. So it has allowed me to interface with other entities and other groups to develop programming or professional development around DEI. So I think this has been, something that has pushed me in a really good direction professionally. It stretches me. We just created the second level to the AFI program. And again, this is another opportunity to expand as a leader in this space, to see what works, to see how we can help other people not only understand the information, but apply it, because that's where we want to go next. We want to help people feel empowered and equipped to apply these principles and these thoughts so that our workplaces are more inclusive. So that's a long answer to your question. And I hope, I hope it kind of hits the nail in terms of one project or activity that has kind of move the trajectory of my my professional work, and it would be in this moment now that I can see, oh yeah, we're growing, and I'm constantly going to other leadership programs and activities to get insight on how we can build and shape and make this experience better. So again, that lifelong learner in me, I'm like, yeah, how can we make this better? How can we prepare other people to do this good work?
What importance do you place on Women's History Month?
Oh my goodness. So I think that Women's History Month is an important component to cultural understanding. I think sometimes the history of women's contributions can be unnoticed, can be kind of set aside, but we have to highlight them. And I love a celebration. So anytime we're able to empower and support the work of women and their contributions, I'm all for it. But I also know the importance of sharing that with younger women for a number of reasons, so that they, one, can see an example of something that perhaps they would like to do, but then also giving them that encouragement that, yeah, you know, you might have to break that glass ceiling in that industry. You might have to do something different for women to find themselves in those maybe male-dominated areas. And so I think women's history is just as important as Black History Month is to me. I think it's sometimes understated, and some people may think it's overstated. I don't think so. I just appreciate the opportunity to really give flowers to women who have done you know, phenomenal work in their respective areas. And so it's vital for us to continue the conversation again, so that we remember, we memorialize, but then we also share and empower and encourage the younger women too.
I know you've done quite a lot here at Suffolk, and so we can list all your accomplishments. Otherwise, this will be probably an hour and more. So
I have
I
a
want
good
to talk
team. I
about,
have good teams.
well, the team has a good leader. So I want to talk about something very specific, the affinity groups at Suffolk. You talked about, you bringing people on board is not enough. When they get here, you have to support them and you have to keep them engaged. And we both can agree that, diversity is one thing. Without inclusion and belonging, you might as well be at square one. So you've been part of creating that belonging here at Suffolk with the affinity groups, the employee resource groups, and AFI. From the standpoint of someone who's learning about these processes as of now, why is it important for you to bring people with commonalities together?
I appreciate student organizations. I was a very involved student. So I was in a sorority, I was in an honor society, I was in all of these things. And it was in those experiences and those communities that I was able to find a kindred spirit. I was able to have conversations that were easy, comfortable, and I relate our affinity groups to those student organizations. Now, granted, our affinity groups have the mission of providing networking experiences for those with like-minded experiences, or even backgrounds that may be similar, social identity backgrounds that may be similar, and professional development. Because again, I feel like student organizations kind of help with that too. So at Suffolk, I find that our employee resource groups offers that. also. You may be in a department where there may be few people who have a similar experience as your own. And you might be in a department where you all are so focused in on the work that you don't have an opportunity to meet any other people on campus. And the affinity groups allow, to me, an easy entree for you to make those connections. And, you know, ERGs are not for everybody. Everybody is not interested in joining a group, and that's fine. But for those who really want to build community, I think it's vital. I think it's important to find an easy entree to making connections in a comfortable environment where you get to learn about the community, you get to learn about other departments. And it's always my hope with ERGs at some point that you might find yourself in a group where you are doing professional development together. So there may be an article that you write with someone who's in your ERG. You all might present at a conference together, but you wouldn't know this person because they work in a whole different building unless you are having that connection point. So I just think it's two things. It's social, but then it's also an opportunity for professional development. And again, I just appreciate the community that can be built based on those things. And again, it's not for everybody. You know, you might not find an ERG that matches what you're interested in or even your social identity, but you could always create one. So come see me if you want to create one. But anyway.
No, I don't want to give you your flowers because I am part of like 3 ERGs on campus. And when I started during the pandemic. And I wouldn't have gotten the chance to know people outside of my department if I wasn't in those ERGs, because like I got to know people based on different areas of interest for me. And I do think that, you know, we don't just show up to work as one identity. And so having those ERGs sort of like gave me those spaces to like know people on campus, but also connect with them based on those parts of my identities that I wanted to share, learn, and honor other folks who have those identities. So that was like the fastest way for me that I connected with people on campus. And I was like, oh, I know that person there. My ERG. So
you know, that makes me happy. That makes me happy.
So with that, I want to say thank you so much for your time, Dr. Smith, and we honor the work that you do, and happy Women's History Month.
Thank you, and same to you. Thanks for being a leader in the career space. We really, really need you in that space. We thank you for your work, and we see it. We see it. So thank you.
Thank you.